The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
First of all, I'd just like to thank both of you for your opinion and all your hard work, and I think there are several Americans, much like myself, that are just hanging on word for Lieutenant Zullo to be announced supposedly at the end of March. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Just so you know, we were talking about that off the air. No one knows what's going to be said, and Trevor, do you mind talking about, you were just with those guys?
No, I was with people closely associated with them. I just did a tour of Arizona, and I spoke at the Western Conservative Conference down there, and I met people who are very closely associated with Sheriff Joe's work, and I pumped them and pumped them and pumped them to try and get as much as I could, but they were very, very close-lipped. So I can speculate what they may have, but I honestly don't know.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We go here. There's two lines open, 303-696-1971. Hey, Rob, you're on 710 KNUS. Our guest is Trevor Loudon. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey,
thanks for the hard work on this. Just a quick question. I was curious if either one of you happened to catch an article in, I want to say January 24th on the American Thinker. And it was kind of an interesting bend on things. Possibly this guy's ties to an Indonesian Islamic-based cult called the Subda.
Yeah, that's
Subud.
Yeah,
Subud, yeah.
That's Loretta Fuddy's group.
Right.
Yeah.
But this article on the Thinker had some really interesting ties that, like the I guess the main hub of.
Well, did you ever see the picture? You ever see the picture of the founder?
Yes.
He looks
and
like Barack Obama. He does. He looks just exactly like Barack Obama.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that really kind of caught my eye. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is looking into a mirror.
Here's the story, and I'm sure that once again that Trevor knows it, probably knows it better. Loretta Fuddy was the woman who allegedly gave what I call the phony PDF file, and to the woman who comes from the Obama's private law firm. And my contention is the kid that I call Jimmy down the hall invented or made the birth certificate. Now, because I had to go out and get my work folder, there's so many holes in the so-called certificate of live birth that woman brought to the White House for Obama to drop that. But
all 28 layers.
Yeah, and indeed. But Loretta Fuddy is now dead, died in a plane crash. But it turns out she was very much involved in this Islamic cult that had its headquarters in Indonesia about the same time. Now, it doesn't mean anything, but it's a conversation. But at the same time, and they brushed up against, there's no question, they brushed up against Stanley Ann Dunham when she was there.
Yeah, look, the Subud organization was very popular amongst Western liberals in the 60s. It was and you can imagine that Stanley Ann Dunham would have been at least interested in Subud when she was in Indonesia at the time. It'd be a very natural fit. So it is a very intriguing connection.
And then suddenly she's the only one in the plane crash that dies.
Well, and in the fact that the U.S. hub for this Subud is
Seattle,
Chicago.
Washington. No, Seattle.
Oh, really?
Yep, Seattle.
Okay. I recall seeing that it had really strong ties to Chicago, but then again, didn't little Miss Stanley Ann take a hike up to Seattle?
Well, she went to
quick,
Seattle.
right?
I mean, in spite of the Obama telling that story to those kids a few years ago, less than 2 years ago, that he went to the airport with his mother to say goodbye to his father, who was off to Harvard. Well, what we know by paper trail and by truth is that this little fellow's about 10 days of age, give or take, and Stanley Ann leaves to go back to the mainland, to Seattle, to go to school. The records are there, the tuition records. People have interviewed the babysitters, seen the rent payment checks. And what's interesting is who pays for all of this. I mean, it still comes back to Stan Dunham works in a furniture store, and Toot works in a bank.
Yeah.
And they're not wealthy people, are they, by any stretch?
Well, there's no evidence that they're wealthy people, but they could still send their boy to a private school.
Well said.
You know.
But it would depend on who he said he was.
Yeah.
I mean, if he arrives to go to Punahou, I think it's pronounced, which is like, it's like Grayland Country Day. Maybe that's a good way to describe it. And he gets into that school. Does he get into it because he is, quote, a politically correct?
Yeah, was he given some sort of scholarship because of his ethnicity or a supposed background
claim,
or whatever?
Or claimed ethnicity.
You know, it's another one of those unanswered questions, isn't it?
And then this really strange name that turns up, I believe it's pronounced Siribaka. And it looks like his mother is putting that on a passport. And does that tie back into the cult that Fuddy was involved in, where they changed their names? Now, I don't know any of this, but I do know that those things happened. That's the MacGuffin, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, how do you know?
Yeah, well, you don't. And look, they're going to be debating Obama's background for decades after he leaves office. I would say they'll be holding academic conferences about this because this is the great scam of the 20th century.
Well, again, you and I spoke more about it off the air than we did on the air. I mean,
21st century, I should say.
But to have a symposium, a gathering like they do in the academy, or as they do in medicine, as they do in astrophysics, they do it, and they bring the great minds together. Not that I'm a great mind, and they say, well, gee, what is it that we know?
Because it has to be done. You know, this is the leader of the free world we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Someone who's presiding over the demise of America. Someone who's done huge damage to the American economy, done huge damage to the American military, and America's standing abroad. And there has got to be reasons why he's doing this, and there may be clues to those reasons and discovering more about his background.
You believe he's doing this with intent?
Look, absolutely.
All right.
You know, he is... The main goal of Obama is to destroy American sovereignty, and he's doing that by destroying the American military. He has done more damage to your U.S. military than most armies could ever contemplate. And he's doing it when Russia and China are both getting more and more belligerent and more aggressive and building up, and Iran is doing the same thing, and this is the time Obama thinks you need to cut your nuclear arsenal down to 265 nukes. When the Russians alone have more than 6,000. That's why Obama can't do anything over the Ukraine, because America's just not prepared to fight.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.